Hello guys, welcome back to another lovely trading video. In this one we're going to be going over two small cap stocks, ALZN and PALT. Did try to do analysis on PALT yesterday, but when the video went rendered it came out quite weird, so I had to take it down. But we'll go on ALZN first. The reason we're going to do two is because there's not much analysis to do on this. It only IPO'd back in late June, so not really enough days to do enough analysis on it. So we can do a quick rundown on it. Firstly, is there any gaps provided? Looking at it, I guess you can consider this a gap, but that's more than just a price target. We don't tend to look at gaps to the upside unless they're a blue chip stock, because we're not looking for it to go up on these kind of small cap stocks where they're usually more rubbish stocks and you expect them to kind of just decrease in price, so you tend to look for gap fills to the downside, and all the gap fills to the downside have so far been filled. So the only gap fill we can see is 13.45, and that would be more just a profit target if we were to continue gapping up. But we'll get rid of that and instead look at the standard deviations. But as I said, it only IPO'd late June, so they're not going to be the most accurate things in the world because they don't tend to work fully until there's at least a year's worth of data. So that's one thing to keep an eye on when looking at stocks that have recently IPO'd. But you'll be able to see that today, at least, they did seem to work quite accurately. You'll be able to see that the standard deviations is around 356 to 358, and you'll be able to see intraday it came up to that target and that ended up being the kind of exact top on the day. So if you were watching that intraday, you kind of knew, okay, that would be a good short area, and then you would also see there was a gap created at 275, and like we say, we're not tending to look at gaps on the top side, but instead looking at the ones to the downside, because these are small cap stocks. You don't want to think of them in a well, you can think of them in a bullish perspective, but they're more likely to hit lower down gaps, or they're more likely to fill lower down gaps than they are high gaps. So I tend to just look at lower gaps when trading small cap stocks. So you'll be able to see that this is exactly where it filled before bouncing off that level. That's one thing. You can even use these gaps intraday. If you go on a 1 minute chart, it gets halted, opens up higher, that gap will most likely get filled on that day. But now we can kind of look, where do we see it going, I guess in the next few days and weeks. And looking at it now, probably nowhere. Reason I say this is it's hit into this first deviation and has since sold off from there. What that does indicate to us is that first deviation has been respected, and it will most likely, as you see with most stocks, is trade within these golden deviations. So it wouldn't be unlikely for that to kind of be the top, and it kind of just play within this $1 to $3.50 range. But that's not saying it can't break out, and if it does, we do obviously have our price targets. You'll be able to see on screen now. We'll plot them all up at 860, 845, and so on. Things with these price targets though is when it IPO'd it was around $35, or got up to around $33 at a high, and so as the stock's now around $2, this does kind of skew the standard deviations, and it's why it's usually a stock I would stay away from, at least trading off kind of standard deviations. It's a stock you could have traded intraday, such as like the gap fill, but that's about all I would be looking for on that. So now we'll go over PLT because that's actually got a bit more data, near enough the whole year. So we can actually do some analysis on this and see where it's most likely going to be heading. So firstly, we'll go on to a yearly chart, see is there any gaps that need to be filled. Yes, there is. Between roughly 405 all the way up to 437 needs to be filled, and we now have a gap fill between 842 and around 960. So again, most likely will get filled, so we can be looking out for that. And what we will do actually, just while we're plotting our support and resistance, is get rid of the top of the fills, because you don't always look for bounces off that. You'll instead be looking for the bounces off the actual gap fill. So now we can see the gap fill areas kind of line up with some sort of support and resistance, as that's usually how standard deviation works. And you'll be able to see this 404 lines up with this statistical mean. So again, more kind of evidence that you'll most likely get a bounce as it comes into this level, and this 842 level lines up quite closely with the fourth deviation on the daily and kind of close to the third deviation on the 4 hour. So again, probably high probability of getting a bounce in that area. Doesn't mean it won't continue down, but would most likely provide a bounce. Now, when we're looking at this stock, we can see it's now closed above this fourth deviation. When a stock does that, we don't tend to trade it because it means it was very overbought. And when a stock does that, it doesn't trade to its full senses, so not as a great thing to be trading, just because, yes, you take on a lot of extra risk when you can be trading stocks that are less risky for the same reward. So that's usually why I stay away from these kind of stocks, but if you still want targets on it, we will provide them in case you are still happy to trade these kind of stocks. And targets, obviously always just these standard deviations, so we'll always plot these just so you can see roughly where these levels are. But that's not the only thing to be looking out for, as when a stock's kind of trading above that third deviation, and if we're looking to short it, we're more looking not to short it now until it can close below that third deviation. So in this case, we have the third deviation at around 885 on the 4 hour and 750 on the daily. So that means if I was looking to get short on this stock, I would be looking for the lower third deviation to be closed below. So in this case, that's 740 or 750. Once we can get a close below 750, then it would most likely signal the move on PALT is finished, and we'll probably come back down to fill the gaps and the statistical mean. So once we can kind of close below that kind of 750 level, then we would most likely push all the way back down to around $4. So that's my analysis on PALT and also ALZN. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope to see you in the next one, and that's it. Peace.